I would like to introduce the people who are with the Browns Foundation who are going to be presenting an alternative plan for the Hiawatha Golf Course area. So please, I see Darwin Dean. If you'd come forward and introduce yourselves and get the presentation going, we would greatly appreciate it. Welcome.
Good evening, President Forney, commissioners, and also superintendents. Before I start speaking, I'd like to have a speaker in front of me who will speak for the community cause.
Good evening, members of the Park Board, Superintendent Bangora, Council Brian Rice, President and Vice President of the Park Board. My name is LaJune Lang. I'm a retired judge and president of the International Leadership Institute. Our institute has been researching the history of African Americans in Minnesota and particularly in this region. We've had the opportunity to daylight a former all-black fire station at 4501 Hiawatha Avenue, and we've been particularly interested in the history of the region of the Hiawatha Golf Course. As you know, Fort Snelling contained very significant African American persons, including Dred and Harriet Scott. A number of enslaved persons also lived at Fort Snelling, and a number of enslaved people arrived at Fort Snelling and ultimately moved to settle in this region that we call Nokomis and Hiawatha. So this community is very old. The roots in this community are very old, but the contributions, the social significance, and the historical context of African Americans in this important first quadrant of settlement in Minneapolis by people other than Native Americans has not been studied. So as a newly appointed park board who does not have the input of an advisory committee or a cultural context study to document and incorporate the contributions of African descendant people, particularly around the Hiawatha Golf Course, I urge you to take the time and put procedures in place so that you are not erasing history. We begin in 1906 with Theodore Wirth becoming the first park superintendent. In 1907, Minneapolis opened its first segregated fire station at 4501 Hiawatha. When Theodore Wirth and the community responded to have the first 18-hole golf course in South Minneapolis, it allowed it to be a segregated facility. African Americans could not enter the clubhouse. They could not belong to the private clubs that were created to allow golfers to have handicaps and compete nationally. So they had to function and make the best of a segregated situation. This is an important part of our history because it impacts housing, it impacts parks and recreation, and it impacts the lives of African descendant people as well as others who settled in and around the Hiawatha Golf Course. We want you to have the opportunity and take the time to learn about Jimmy Slimmons, Solomon Hughes, Earl Bowman, William Berry, Eddie Manderville, Harry Davis Sr., Harry Davis Jr., Charles Rogers, and the young Tiger Woods who followed in the footsteps of the boxer Joe Louis coming to the Hiawatha Golf Course. We feel that your few months in office have not given you enough time to adequately understand the situation, understand the hydrology, understand the history, and so we ask that you take the time as you look at this landmark area to give it the proper diligence. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm just going to interrupt for a second. I just want everybody to know there's a room over here to the side if you would like to. Whatever. I know we've got a lot of people in the room and we do still like to be socially distanced. So we just want you to be aware that you can avail yourself of that space. Sorry, Darwin. Thank you so much.
That's okay. I understand house cleaning. A lot of things that I was going to say today have been already adequately quoted. So I'll move straight to the bottom of my speech today, which is, in essence, the Bronze Foundation team was established to maintain the civic and cultural history of Hiawatha. This team was put together so that we could solve the water issue, secure the cultural history, and save the park board and also the city of Minneapolis funding. We'd like to partner with the park board to solve these issues, to solve the water issue, and also to help create a community for people, youth, and not just golfers. Long time ago, before many of us in this room were even a thought, that golf course was used more as a park where people actually came, sit down, they picnicked. Because you have to understand that in South Minneapolis, right where Hiawatha is located, that district was redlined and you had a large area for a minority population. And so they welcomed that particular golf course, the park. And so when golfers started playing there, it wasn't just about golf. It was a community event that everyone in the community actually came, celebrated, and enjoyed. And so we'd like to continue that legacy for the youth that's in that community. We'd also like to partner with the park board to solve the groundwater issue, to also preserve the cultural aspect of Hiawatha, and to also continue to work with the city of Minneapolis to help remove the trash situation, the phosphorus that's flowing into the lake. We want to clean up that environment, and we want to do the best that we can from an environmental standpoint of view. And I think we've put together a team of people with the Bronze Foundation to accomplish that task. And so the first person that I'd like to introduce today is Mr. Tom Osland to come up and speak to you about the land itself and what it means to actually preserve the culture of Hiawatha. Tom.
Thank you. Good evening, President Forney, Commissioners, Superintendent. My name is Tom Osland. I am the CEO and founder of O2 Design, a planning and landscape architecture firm right here in Minneapolis. I'm here tonight to request that the Board of Commissioners table voting on the current master plan for Hiawatha for a 3-month period to allow our planning team to develop an alternative proposal for Hiawatha. I'll be leading that planning effort, assisted by a talented team of professionals. Charles Birnbaum, the CEO of the Cultural Landscape Foundation, Andy Comer of Pace Engineering, Tom Lehman, golf course designer. Collectively, we will provide a viable alternative to this important community open space for South Minneapolis. Knowing that this project has had its complications and complexities, we have begun to explore the project's challenging parameters, and I believe our team is poised and ready to develop an inspired alternative proposal that satisfies the following criteria. 1, to embrace the cultural significance of this place for the Black community of South Minneapolis. Our alternative will identify, celebrate, and preserve the important cultural elements that have shaped the African American golfing community for over 80 years at Hiawatha. With the assistance and guidance of the Cultural Landscape Foundation, the alternative proposal will meet the federal and state requirements for Section 106 historic review process. The second criteria, a sustainable hydrological strategy. Our proposal will investigate a comprehensive approach of the entire Nokomis, Hiawatha watersheds and develop concepts that address the groundwater issues, the stormwater management strategy, and the wetland creation. Andy Comer from PACE will be sharing some conceptual thinking of how to creatively handle the technical concerns of how water affects Hiawatha later in our presentation. Third criteria is to expand the program elements. Our alternative will develop seasonal recreational opportunities, circulation trails, educational and community programs or facilities for all ages with concentration on children and teens. Using the program elements vetted through the CAC process identified in the current plan as a springboard, our team will build on those desires, working with the Park Board staff to guide and shape this alternative proposal, ensuring its inclusion of the desires of the community as discovered through the previous master planning efforts. The fourth criteria is to preserve the entire 18 holes of golf. The alternative will preserve the entire 18 holes, reconfiguring it as allowed with the help of Tom Lehman. The approach will use sustainable environmental principles to guide the reconfiguration of the course, creating a diverse series of habitats that will affect wildlife, while simultaneously creating a beautiful, challenging, and memorable golfing experience for the community. Tom will share some of his thoughts later on in the presentation, conceptually, of how Hiawatha can become a viable asset to the Park Board and to the community. The fifth criteria is really looking at phasing and budget. Our alternative will identify logical phasing strategies for implementation. Working together with Park Board staff, the alternative proposal will identify all the agencies, all the permitting requirements and reviews necessary for the project to be implemented. Based on our team's collective experience of working on projects of similar size and types, we believe our alternative proposal budget should be 20 to 25% more cost effective than the current plan. And lastly, a funding a funding strategy. We believe our alternative will identify funding sources from both public and private organizations. Sources like the MPCA, Watershed Project Funding, the State Board of Water and Soil Resources grant programs would be appropriate funding partners. Our team is also convinced that the alternative proposal will attract significant private funding from local and national philanthropic organizations. In closing, I would like to thank you for your time and your consideration of our request. Andy?
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to be in front of you to further discuss some of the water ideas that have already been presented to you. My name is Andy Comer. I'm actually a national NCEES water engineer. I'm not licensed in the state of Minnesota yet. The May board meeting is supposed to change that. I'm currently licensed in California, Louisiana, and Oregon, and we practice both nationally and internationally. I grew up in Minneapolis, just outside of Minneapolis. I was a Park Board employee for 7 years, gross, in Columbia. I graduated cum laude from the University of Minnesota Civil Engineering, actually with Commissioner Benny. Did natural wetlands research there. Went to Arizona State and did wetlands research on a large 70-acre project there. And I've been very fortunate to be involved in water. Water is such a cool field to be in. And for 20 years, I practiced at a company called PACE in Southern California. And we've worked on dozens of comparable projects. In front of you here on the lower left is the award-winning Irvin Magic Johnson Park. It's a stormwater capture, large lake system. In the center there is the Wilds Golf Course. It's a project that we've done in Minnesota. And on the right there is an example of another golf course flood project, and there are several of them in the California Delta area. Up in the Delta area, you have high groundwater, low flat elevation. I tell people every time I go to Sacramento and I'm driving around there that it feels like home, because it does feel like Minneapolis, and that's where a majority of my work is located in our work. And PACE's motto is advance water engineering in partnership with nature. So if it's not right for the client and it's not right for nature, we don't do it. And in this case, maybe one of the criticisms of one of the early concepts we had was that it wasn't natural enough. We pivoted off there, and we're really excited to show you what I call Alternative 6 tonight. Alternatives 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 were developed by Barr. Barr did an amazing job coming up with lots of documentation and great data research and 5 good ideas. This just happens to be a 6th idea that we'd like you to consider. And in that idea, it opens up more available dry land. Do what you want with that land. You guys are the park board, but it doesn't seem to make 100% sense to maybe flood land when you could use it for other purposes. And we've got plenty of wetlands and water to share with you tonight. So just real quick description of what's going out there for a lot of people in the audience. I understand the commissioners understand this very well. But if you can see my cursor here, here's your 50-acre Lake Hiawatha. Minnehaha Creek is flowing all the time, comes in from Lake Minnetonka's dam, and it has a constant flow of water into the lake, has a stopover like a train station, and then it heads out to the Mississippi River. North side, you've got flows coming in off of the urban watersheds that flow directly into the lake where they stop over. And then there's flows that come into the golf course ponds, and they're actually pumped up and over the berm into the lake, and they go down to the Mississippi. So there's 3 main sources in, 1 source out, and there's a berm on the edge at elevation 815.5. So that means there's about 2.5, 3.5 feet of freeboard on that shoreline. I happened to be out there last night, and that's about exactly what it looked like. So over time, with more development, more urbanization, there's just happens to be more flow. You could also argue, global warming or not, that there's more rainfall as well. And so more flows coming down Minnehaha, more flows coming off the urban watersheds, and the lakes have to operate higher. And what I mean by lakes, both Hiawatha does, and to the south, Lake Nokomis does as well. Because if you released more water from Nokomis, it would actually pile up Hiawatha higher. And it's funny because Nokomis is actually just a little bit higher than Hiawatha, and there's a chance to maybe connect the 2 things together, as Tom Osland had said, and sort of have a 2-for-1 benefit by what we're going to show you tonight. And then one of the park board's main goals I hear over and over from a lot of you is we need to reduce the amount of groundwater pumping. Because as I showed in the earlier YouTube presentation, Minnehaha Creek comes down, it ends up in the lake, it leaks down into the area underneath the golf course, it mounds. We pump it up to the lake, it leaks back down. We pump it up to the lake, and so that just pumps in a circle, and that's the $5,000 a year or so in electricity costs to pump that water back up and keep the golf course and the residents dry currently. So why can't we get more water out of Hiawatha and just solve that problem easily? As Barr pointed out, this is a figure from their report. Here is a profile of the ground at the bottom of Minnehaha Creek, downstream of Hiawatha on the way to the Mississippi River. And water at Lake Hiawatha is at about elevation 812. And as it wants to flow out by gravity, it runs into restrictions at 28th, 30th, and further downstream. And so in order to solve that problem, the city of Minneapolis would have to go in and remove large sewer tunnels and gas lines and things like that that are pretty much infeasible. And so the master plan rightfully pointed out that long term, the only way out of this mess is to raise the water surface. So we got to raise it in Hiawatha, we got to raise it all over the place in order to drive this water out. And I fundamentally agree with that. But when I read the Star Tribune article 7 or 8 weeks ago, and I'm just a volunteer for 7 weeks on the job, if you will, I thought to myself, if you're going to solve a flood problem, why would you pile more water up? And that's kind of what alternatives 1 through 5 do. They store the water on the golf course. And so here's the lake over here on the right. the water would then pile up the way it's supposed to, but then it would backwater on top of the golf course, so it would be seasonally flooded when flows come in, and it would be permanently wet on a large majority of the land, and I'll show you a plan view here in a minute. So that causes more basement intrusion in the surrounding properties. There's some houses on the northwest corner that are very low, and they rely on that pumping to prevent flooded basements. But more importantly, when water comes down, it's coming down heavier and heavier every year. It used to be 300 cubic feet per second, then it went to 400, then it went to 500. A lot of water's coming down. We need a place to put that water. So, as I said before, 5 alternatives from the Barr report. I just chose arbitrarily alternative 4, and that's what's shown here in front of you. And as I said before, the solution, if you don't look at the black arrows that I drew here, was essentially bring the water in from the northwest, store it on the golf course lands, and then they had proposed actually an open channel, a new opened creek, if you will, to put some of the flows into the lake. And then you have Minnehaha flows doing what they do, which is to go through the lake and out. So those were alternatives 1 through 5 in a nutshell. But what if we considered alternative 6, which was keep that open channel on the upper north part of the golf course, just like was shown in the Barr report. But the flows coming in here in the northwest, the low point, instead of sending them into the course and flooding the course, why not send it up to that same creek, bring that around, and then when it gets to the lake, just don't put it in the lake. So just go clockwise around like this, go counterclockwise around like this, and shoot it out of there. And I had previously suggested to pull Lake Hiawatha level down to give the park board more land. But as I talked to a lot of you, that was a terrible idea. And so now I'm proposing, let's leave Lake Hiawatha alone. So, and it's operated over the years between elevation 810 and 813. Let's leave it at 810. That's a nice elevation. It keeps everybody dry, all the neighborhoods dry. And accordingly, this is what the concept looks like. So I'm going to spend just a second on this slide here if you want to take your time and stare at this. But essentially, a new naturalized creek would go counterclockwise along the north side, and that would operate and flow down whenever there's flows come out of the neighborhood. And then it would combine with flows from the south coming from Minnehaha Creek, which would also be renaturalized. A lot more riparian wetland habitat, more biological diversity, and it would make its way out. And now what that would do is it would allow the water surface to pile up any way it wants to. So if it's dry, drought, we're down to 811. If it's moderately wet, it's 813. If it gets even wetter, it's 814, it's 815. It can go as high or as low as it wants. It's going up and down like a natural system, and it's exiting the property. And on the other side of that berm, you've got Lake Hiawatha, and we would just basically have a tow drain system that would connect the lake with this upland area here, and we would maintain a low pumping rate because we're not trying to push water up there anymore. We're just keeping it in the natural condition, and we would just lift that water out of the tow drain and into this creek, and it flows. So that way the creek stays fresh, it doesn't get stagnant. You've always got flow coming from the north, you've got flow coming from the south, you've got a beautiful natural system. In this case, the beach would get relocated over to here. You'd have walking trails, bird watching, hiking, etc. along this naturalized zone here between the lake and the creek. And you would have a lot of benefit on the project and retain the land use. Upstream of that, by the way, I know trash has been a big problem, phosphorus has been a big problem. You've got a point of control close to roadways where you could actually inject flocculant, you could collect trash, and you could prevent it from going downstream. So here from the Barr report again, I keep stealing a lot of content from there. 1930 through 2020, you can see the lake level at Hiawatha. In the last 30 years, it's gotten up higher and higher and higher, around 813. I'm proposing an alternative 6 that we would basically set it back down where it was in the 1970s, 60s, 50s, etc. You got a couple feet of freeboard for water to go. And so by doing so, you'd have protection of the entire site from a 100-year storm event. So if you look here, the water surface elevation, there's 2 different ways that Barr calculated what it would be. it would climb in a big storm event. So a 2-year storm event, it would go to elevation 814. In a 5-year, go to 815. In a 10-year, go to 816. Well, the burn that kind of divides these creeks has an elevation of 817. So nothing will ever damage the property. However, we're going to shave peak flows as the water surface gets up above 815. And what I mean by that is, as water's coming down in this big catastrophic event and water's pouring down into the site and headed to the Mississippi, when it rises up, we'll be able to bring a little water into the lake. The lake can then rise from 810 to 811 to 812 to 813, and we can store 150 acre feet in the freeboard of the lake without damaging the golf course, which is 12 hours of 150 cubic feet per second. So if you look at all these ball reports like I have, it's a lot of water for a lot of time that you can store in the lake as a secondary relief point for the water heading out to the Mississippi River. And just to point out, that amount of storage in light blue is greater than all of the volume here in green, which was previously shown on the flood maps. I think my favorite part of the project is, and I've heard that this is a man-made solution, I believe that we are going to start with man providing something that is in partnership with nature. And if you look at all these projects that the city of Minneapolis has done on the left at Minnehaha Creek, it's a beautiful improved creek situation. On the right is Mountain House Creek up in Northern California in that California Delta area. These are amazing naturalized systems, and they can be designed to have all sorts of habitat and low flow, mid flow, high flow configurations for biological diversity. So I hope you agree with me that this alternative 6 solution, if considered, would be a win on water quality and flood protection, a win on improved ecology and park uses. You'd have more dry land and more things to do on the park. And number 3, you'd protect the historical uses of the site and the existing feel. It would feel just like it does today, only improved. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Tom Lehman and answer any questions.
Okay, actually, Tom, I'm sorry, but we have 1 minute before open time, so I'm going to have to ask that you wait until our open time, and then we do have another time certain at 5:40. 7 o'clock. I am closing our open time, and we will go back then to our agenda, which is the Bronze Foundation. I believe that you do have some more things that you'd like to share. So for everybody to know, we're going to have the Bronze finish their presentation. Then commissioners will have the opportunity then to ask questions of them. And after that, we'll get back to our full agenda. So who is next? Tom? Okay, you're here. Thank you.
Well, thank you, President Forney, for giving us the time. I know it's been a bit difficult, but thank you. I was wondering, how much time do we have? Because I want to make sure the Reverend has time to get up here and speak as well, so I don't want to take...
Initially, I'd indicated 15 minutes, but I would like you to use your time prudently, I guess is the best way to say it.
I'll be very prudent, thank you.
We have quite an agenda to continue to.
Excuse me. Well, the first thing I want to say is I met Ed Manderville when I was about 16 or 18 years old up in Alexandria in a golf tournament, and he was a cool guy and hit the ball a long way, and we all wanted to be like Ed Manderville, and he said, well, when you come down to Minneapolis, you got to come down to Hiawatha Park and play on Friday in the Hustle. That sounds like fun. What is that? Just a big golf tournament. All the guys get together, throw some cash in. So I came down, I played in the Hustle, and I figured out why it was called the Hustle, because I got hustled pretty good by those guys. But great memories, and so whatever you're doing for Ed, I would support as well for whatever that's worth. But I appreciate the chance to be here, and actually really appreciate the fact that all the comments went on first, because to me it was so important to hear all the different opinions, because I do believe, like I think everybody here believes, that all opinions are important. There's no opinion more important than the other opinions. Is to hear everybody's opinion and why they believe it, what they would like, what their passion is, I think is important. So I think all that we're asking is that, you know, at this point in time, I'm not sure there's been this kind of situation before, but there's pushback on you. There's pushback on you on an alternate plan that could actually solve water issues. And that pushback is not a bad thing. Pushback, in my opinion, is a good thing, because it forces everybody to answer significant questions. The questions are the questions everybody poses at this podium. You know, there's a lot of different things important to a lot of different people. And so the pushback, I think, is a really, really healthy part of the process. All we're asking for is more time for this pushback to be developed and examined and looked at. Now, I know for a fact, because I'm two things. I'm a golfer and I'm a golf course designer. And I know in golf course design, I'm not the guy who makes the decisions on all the hydrology. I don't make the decisions on what kind of grass is going to go where. The big decisions need the expert opinion of engineers and hydrologists and agronomists and things like that. So you bring in the experts who have expert opinion based upon science. And you take the science and you make the best decision possible. So when you have experts coming in with different science, to me it seems like it's only natural to take the time to do the discovery to find out if there's any merit in that science. Now that merit in that science is important because of what you heard Al talking about, okay, which is the second part of what I do as a golfer. And I'm going to explain to you why Hiawatha is important to me as a golf course. Hiawatha is a championship golf course. It always has been from the very beginning. They host tournaments there. They host big events there. They host the Bronzeville Invitational for over 60 years. They've hosted the U.S. Public Links. They've hosted the Minnesota Public Links. They've hosted college tournaments, high school tournaments, MGA tournaments, tournaments of all kind. It's not just a golf course. It's a championship golf course. And because it's a championship golf course, it really changes the dynamic of whether, well, we'll just make it 9. Well, I understand the issues of making it 9, and I've listened and I've heard, and I can see the reason. But I can also tell you that from a golfer's perspective, for people who are in the state of Minnesota who love the game of golf, for people who live in the Twin Cities, for those who live in the neighborhood, 9 holes isn't even close to what this course is all about. And it's based upon the history of Hiawatha. Now, what will the course look like if we ended up keeping 18 holes and changing it? It would be a nature reserve with a historic routing just weaving through nature. And I think a lot of the issues that people are concerned about on the environmental level can be answered with more pushback and discovery into the secondary plan, because I don't think it's understood. But the history of the golf course is so founded in the people who lived there. Okay, and if you look into the history of the golf course, who are the people who made the difference? Well, if you go way back, I mean, right now there's a tournament going on in Augusta, Georgia called the Masters. All right, Tiger Woods is playing. Tiger Woods is playing in big part because of what happened at Hiawatha Park Golf Course back in the 50s. No joke. Because back then, black men could not play on the PGA Tour. It's a stain on society, absolutely. However, you had people like Sullivan Hughes, Jimmy Slemons, Ted Rhodes, Charlie Sifford, who stood up and pushed and pushed and pushed. And so in 1952, Sullivan Hughes was given access to play in the St. Paul Open. He opened the door on the PGA Tour in Minnesota. And then in 1960, the PGA Tour opened their entire tour to people of all races. Okay, so if you ask, why is Hiawatha significant? That answers your question. It answers your question completely. It's the history of what happened there. And that history belongs to every person who plays golf, every person who lives in the neighborhood, every person who's ever been to Hiawatha, every person who loves the game, every Minnesotan. That history is significant to everybody. So when you make decisions simply to say, well, we don't want to consider be worried about that history, I think you're making a bad choice because, and I'm not saying anything other than a secondary plan that gives pushback to you with science to support it deserves to be looked at. Because I happen to think that if you do that, you're going to find a way to answer a lot of the questions that a lot of the folks here tonight have in a way that makes way more people happy without diminishing and minimizing a bunch of people who this is so important to. So, and I will say this one more thing, and I'll tell you a quick story. I won the British Open in 1996, and I had this big policeman who was my security guy. I was ranked number 2 in the world at the time, and so everywhere I went, me and my caddy and this policeman, he chauffeured us around the golf course to the driving range, the first tee, to the media center, and anyway, get to the 72nd hole, and I hit my second shot on the green, and I had the tournament won. And the crowd all runs forward at the British Open, and so you have 50 people deep of people you have to fight through to get to the green. And so this big policeman grabbed me from behind and started swatting people to the side, and we got to the green, finally breaking through the crowd, and he puts his arm around me and says, "Hey, Tom, we've been through a lot of crap together. Now go get that trophy." Okay, so here's what I would say to you. I think the Bronze Foundation and the people behind it would be a great partner and a great teammate for you. I believe, like that policeman, myself and my caddy formed a team that week, that we can deal with any crap together and come up with a solution that makes sense. Okay, if we listen to each other and work together, and that our commitment to you is that we'll go through any crap we have to go through with you if we can do this together. Thank you very much. God bless you.
And looks like we have another speaker. Please introduce yourself.
Madam Chair, directors, my name is Alfred Babington Johnson, and I am the founder and the CEO of the Stair Step Foundation and the convener of His Works United, which is the largest collaboration of African American churches in the state of Minnesota. The consideration of the future of a Hiawatha course provides you with a special opportunity. You can do what many governmental bodies have neglected to do. I encourage you to demonstrate sensitivity to a segment of the community that is generally less resourced and rarely has issues and sensitivities of its own respected in the halls of power. I'm talking about African Americans. The Hiawatha Golf Course is an important page marker in our history. Recorded golfing occurred in Minnesota as early as 1893, but golf and the Professional Golfers Association, formed in 1916, have had a long history of racism with white-only clauses in PGA bylaws. Minnesota was as guilty as the rest of America, and blacks were prohibited from competing in local golf tournaments. Now, a meaningful history note. In 1938, Hiawatha was the first course here to allow black players. And in 1939, Hiawatha became the site of the first golf tournament in the upper Midwest created by and for black golfers. And it wasn't until 1952 that the PGA voted to allow black golfers. But Hiawatha has been a historic gathering place for decades for people of color in South Minneapolis. So as Mr. Lehman mentioned, Charlie Sifford and Lee Elder and Calvin Pete were able to begin to spark the imagination and raise the possibilities of young African Americans to engage and then compete in a sport preserved for the landed gentry. Tomorrow at 10:34 a.m. Eastern Time, Tiger Woods will tee off at Augusta National Golf Course. Michael Strahan and Scott Van Pelt today remarked that the atmosphere at the course, even in practice rounds, has become electric with the anticipation of Tiger's involvement. The not so hidden message here is the power of the narrative. Tiger comes on the course and African Americans and Asian Americans swell with pride. His participation has changed the storyline backwards and going forwards for generations of children of color that see their opportunity horizons lifted. The request of the community, as we hope you will delay this decision and consider the new information, is that you'll recognize the importance of this cultural landmark. Let your decision embrace voices at this table with solutions that encompass both the environmental challenges and the need to continue to create new storylines in which our young people can dream broader dreams and their parents can continue to celebrate important historic accomplishments. I ask not that you just acknowledge us at this decision table, but that you give weighted value to our voices as the fate of this cultural landmark is decided. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Darwin, is that the end?
Yes, and I'd like to wrap up by saying thank you for allowing us to have this conversation about maintaining 18 holes of golf at Hiawatha. Thank you for recognizing the fact that it is a historical landmark, championship course. I'd also like to thank the speakers that showed up here tonight. A lot of them traveled distances. Andy Comer came from California. Tom Lehman flew in from Arizona. And then, of course, we have our locals, Reverend Babington. We have Tom Osland. we have a group of men that came here today, not just to speak to you about golf, but to speak to you about the community that we have contributed to for years, lived in, played in. You know, Mr. Ryan, Tom Ryan from the MGA came up. He expressed the value of maintaining a championship course. Hiawatha is a championship course. We heard from the USGA today about how important it is to maintain 18 holes of golf on a championship course. If you change it, you change the value. You change everything about that environment that exists today. You simply just erase it. We presented an alternative plan. We believe that it's a good plan. Let me change that. We believe it's a great plan. And it's a plan that you should accept and move forward with. Again, thank you, President Forney, for listening to us today. Thank you, commissioners, for considering an alternative. Superintendent Bangora, we appreciate you being here, and we would love to have your support. Thank you for listening to us. It's been a long evening, and everybody, I hope, is a win, win, win with the fact that we want to solve the water solution. We want to save finances with our plan. And we also want to serve the community that Hiawatha actually exists in and preserve the cultural history that exists. Thank you very much. Good night, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Okay, I'm sorry. The intent is now for us as commissioners, if there are questions that we have, to ask of you. So whatever. So if there are any commissioners that would like to ask any of the presenters, this is your opportunity to do it now. So, Commissioner Aveni.
Okay.
Sandy's still here?
Yeah. Okay. You know, so
Andy, you want to come forward?
I think, yeah, if Mr. Comer could come up.
More so than me.
So, you know, golf is a thing that when people show up to do it, there are rules that are appropriate, and that's and they know them, and they engage in that activity together, following those rules. And I have to bring this up. I do not want to bring this up, okay? But I actually am required. So my profession is licensed by a board in Minnesota. We also have licensed teachers that work here, but my profession is the same as Mr. Comer's. And in Minnesota, our rules are particular to Minnesota. And I have to say that it's very important that my fellow commissioners, please hear me on this. This is a violation of statute for us to have this presentation. And I'm glad we've had the presentation. I think we should hear the presentation. But this is violating practicing engineering without a license in Minnesota. And Mr. Comer himself said that he is not licensed here, and you know, please listen to what I'm saying. This is a really serious thing. So any person that is deemed to be practicing professional engineering who holds out as being able to perform, or who does perform any technical professional service such as planning, design, etc., and then no person other than one licensed by this statute and by that board may use the term professional engineer. Now, why is this important? Not only is this a violation of statute, and this is a you know, this is not just a gotcha. This is actually, Mr. Dean, I want you to hear this, because I have a lot of respect for you. I really do, and I do too for you, Mr. Comer. But there are reasons why states license engineers, because engineers work in a context. They work with a land. They work with frost lines. They work with soils and geology. And we can't work beyond our ability. So although I'm licensed, for example, in the area of civil, I'm not going to do a road design. It's not my discipline. It's not my area. It's not my expertise. So I think there's a lot of enthusiasm from our friends here at Bronze that this is a good design, but I'm going to say that I disagree. This is not a good design. This is a solution, maybe, but the ability to permit this solution is the longest shot. It's bigger. It's harder to do than 2 holes in one day. So I think I just wanted to make those comments, and I hope other people will ask questions of the team, and I'm going to stop for now.
Okay. Uh,
Can I respond to that, or?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
certainly.
great.
Sorry.
All right. Well, Commissioner Benny, thanks for taking all my calls over the last few weeks. Appreciate all the comments. There's a lot of content right there. First of all, I read the statutes. My attorney read the statutes. I had another attorney read the statutes. I'm a volunteer right now, and just because I know a lot about water engineering doesn't mean I can't volunteer to give my opinion on something, just like everybody else did today. And it's standard practice. I don't know how much you do out of state, but it's very standard practice to engage in looking at a concept and then apply for licensure. I've already paid all my fees to the state of Minnesota, even though I might not ever see you guys again. I've paid all my fees to NCEES, which is a national organization that gives comity or reciprocity to any state as long as I just apply the paperwork. It's a common thing. It gets rubber stamped and it goes through. I never represented myself as a Minnesota engineer. And so according to my interpretation of the code, I don't know how much you've read it or your attorneys, but I have not violated anything with respect to those codes. Number two, I just wanted to say two things. I'd love to hear all the comments today. Flooding. I just want everybody to understand there's so many people that live around the community. The site is going to be at elevation 813 to 814. That means the water is going to be piled up everywhere, and they're going to reduce pumping or stop pumping, and they would have to install wells all over the place. In our solution, we'd actually keep the groundwater table down where it is today, where it's been for the last decade, so you guys can stay high and dry. I think that part didn't come through. And as far as getting it permitted, in my opinion, if you look at the plan that I presented on page 9 of 15, it's the same amount of, I'm going to say, naturalization in my plan that is in the master plan. There's naturalization and changes to what's out there in the master plan. There's changes in the plan that we presented today. They're the same amount of acreage, about 30 acres. Thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Comer?
I'm sure there's going to be more questions. Yes. So if I'm not seeing any lights, so I'll just ask a couple questions. First of all, I think I'm not sure if you saw our packet, for our board meeting, but we do have a lot of procedural items that we need to deal with. Probably the largest one is community involvement. So I can't remember who all has referred it to me, but what is it called? Cobb's Creek has been used as quote unquote an example. And I'm just curious if we have an idea of, was there community involvement in that? That is probably the most, as you just heard, I didn't take a tally of who's for, who's against, and everything. But this community is very engaged, very, very engaged in this. And so, we want to make sure that, did Cobb's Creek have community engagement? Can somebody answer that question?
Did they have community engagement?
That's the question
Yes,
to
but
all
I
of you.
believe Mr. Osland can speak on that more
Yeah.
thoroughly than I can.
Yes, President Forney, the Cobb's Creek example did go through rigorous community engagement because it was in what was determined, a historic, African-American neighborhood. They wanted to check in, make sure, and went through the CAC process as well, as far as we understand. It's been a quite successful model, and it caught the attention of our team because of that success. Different issues at Hiawatha in terms of the hydrology, but similar in terms of the programmatic needs. So hopefully that answers your question.
It helps to answer the question. The thing is that we've gone through our community engagement, took quite a bit of time, and so we would need to reconvene in Cobb's Creek. Did you have to go back to the community, or did this, was right off the block, was your plan? I guess I'm just really concerned, about
Sure.
going through another
Right.
6-7 year process is what we've gone through. And I just want to hear, what thoughts on that.
I don't know what the exact timing and how they handled their community engagement process, but I don't think it's unusual for the park board to go back and reestablish a community engagement committee if there was a need to do that. I think there's history that that's been done before. I've been involved. I was, I think Jennifer, sorry, Superintendent Ringgold knows I was the lead of the renovation and redesign of the Minneapolis Sculpture Garden with the park board staff and the Walker staff. We held intensive community engagement meetings, and we did it very efficiently, I believe, during that process. And I think the results speak for themselves.
No, I'm very aware of that process and everything, but what we're talking about is going back. Anyway, so I just wanted to ask that question. Then another thing is, I can't believe who might have mentioned it. I think it was you, Darwin, that said something about the fact that this might be more, I can't remember what your words were, but anyway, cost effective. And I was just wondering, have we looked at what this plan might be and where you're pulling that particular opinion out?
President Fournier, it was me that made that statement.
Oh, thank you.
And we did, I mean, we looked at the existing plan. They referenced a range between $40 and $63 million. Based on our past experience, and again, we're not presenting a plan. We're presenting a concept. We're asking for time to develop a plan. But based on our working on similar project types, similar project sizes all over the country, we think it falls 20 to 25% less than the number that was thrown out in the master plan.
Okay, and I just wanted to know where you might have been pulling that out. So I will let others speak. I believe that Commissioner Olson, you might have been next, so.
Yeah. Can you please describe to me how your plan is a compromise for the great majority of Minneapolis residents who want no golf or 9 holes of golf? How are you meeting those residents in the middle?
As I just referenced, Commissioner Olson, this is not a plan yet. The plan is yet to be developed. We're looking at a concept, and part of the concept is to retain the 18 holes of golf and use the master plan, the existing master plan information and program that came out of it, and see if those two things can merge. And all we're asking for is the time to do that, and come back to you with a plan that I think will answer the question you just asked.
Okay, well, even in the concept, I see no intention of compromise. It is our way of 18 holes or no way. That is what I see. And you can have 3 months to create something that is not a compromise, and it'll still not be a compromise. And so, the fact that we even put aside the time to see this plan, which is, half-baked, some sort of contorting effort to keep 18 holes so that we can discount all the testimony and all the elections and everything that we've had around this issue you don't need to respond to that. It doesn't sit right with me.
Excuse me, no,
I don't need to hear your response. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. You're out of order. Okay.
Commissioner Olson, if I could just quickly say, though, that piling water on half the site, let's just pretend like we wanted no golf. How is that better than retaining that land for park uses? That's the part that I'm a little confused about. So if you look at this slide right here, if I take the white circle off, that's the master plan. So you just basically, for better or for worse, sort of take away half the site versus a dry site. Okay.
I would ask our senior planner, Superintendent Michael Schrader, do you have any thoughts on?
And I
Want to respond? Okay. And I don't really want
This
to
is
respond.
the
I don't
bronze
want to
time.
enumerate.
I was just trying to answer your
Yeah,
question.
that's fine.
Yeah.
I don't really want to enumerate all the multiple benefits of wetlands right now. But I appreciate that. So we can go on to the next.
Commissioner Thompson.
Thank you, President Forney. I'm just, I am hearing some objections, and I just wanted to ask you if they're a very big reason why I feel like we should delay the amendment that I put forth. Should I wait to discuss that then, or is that something that's appropriate now?
The amendment is for the.
Wait, okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
on the agenda, so.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Oh, I believe it's Vice President Smith.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for the information, for everyone that has come and sacrificed their time with their families. It's really important. And I think a lot of us are missing the mark in terms of the historic significance of the Black community, which oftentimes is neglected. And I understand that because we live in a society, a white supremacist society, that says Black people are less than. And so we acknowledge the indigenous people and the sacrifices and the murder to those folks, but we fail to recognize how important it feels for people to feel welcome into a space. It's just as important as existing. And so my question, as it relates to the presentation that you all gave, you talked about preserving 18 holes by reconfiguring the water as allowed, considering the environmental aspects of it. So can you just come up and walk me through one more time on I'm looking at your presentation. So you have the pumping site in the upper left-hand corner where the trash collection, which is a big concern for my neighbors and for people in the city, especially the folks that clean up the trash. So can you explain to me that portion of it along with, I don't remember what you call this red dot or red kind of line.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for the opportunity to just describe this idea or concept, which is, I'm glad you said that, Tom. Essentially, for the last decades, the site, the water table, the groundwater table has been held down by a little bit of pumping, $5,000 a year worth of pumping, just to keep the site nice and dry, keep the basements relatively dry. In this plan, it would do the same thing. We'd have a red tow drain that would essentially connect the lake to the upstream in the northwest corner pond. And we would maintain that groundwater table just the way it's been forever, so that the residents don't have to deal with basement intrusion. So now the site is dry, and you can use it for whatever we want to use it for. A lot of different uses. There's a lot of acreage there, as you said. And then the water courses, instead of essentially basically doubling the size of Lake Hiawatha on the golf course, now you'd have 2 Lake Hiawathas essentially in the master plan. Instead of doing that, you would have these beautiful naturalized wetland riparian water courses. One that goes clockwise around the top, one that goes counterclockwise around the bottom. They're connected on the right with a bunch of bird habitat. We could make it whatever we wanted to make it. We can make it optimal. And then it would make its way out on the right. So you'd retain the lake and the lake uses, you would enhance those, everything would be high and dry, and you'd have freeboard in the lake for when the flood comes, we'll have a place to put it.
Okay, awesome, thank you. And I know, by no means am I an expert. I am not an engineer. I'm a Black woman, and I have multiple degrees, just like many folks sitting here. But I do have a question, because one of the mothers that was here earlier mentioned the sort of man-made creek portion running through the park. And since this is a park that we frequent as a family, I'm curious if you can explain just the proximity to the playground and sort of all of the features there that community use on a regular basis.
Absolutely. I stood in the driving rain last night. I was out there for about 30 minutes. I walked all around this area right here. And so I started here, parked here, and walked around here, around this front here. There's a wall right here. All of this beautiful park area. It's a gorgeous little park. We would avoid that, and we would just have this beautiful natural stream that would be in front of it, basically where the edge of the lake is now, and then the stream would go through where the golf course is now. So this stream never goes through the park, as somebody had mentioned earlier, and then there would be a bridge across this creek right here, and you get right back to the boating and the beach features and everything else that you'd like to do. I understand the significance of that. I grew up swimming in lakes all the time, all the lakes around here.
Okay, and then, so when we talk about just kind of the I guess like the man-made portion of it, what does that do to the pre-existing habitat, and the natural habitat there, and the birds and all of the other
So right now
environmental
you've basically got, if I just go back to what's existing. Existing right now, it's blue. It's blue water all the way around the lake. And on the very edge of the lake, you've maybe got 5 or 6 or 7 feet of cattails or bulrush. Pretty kind of low amount of biological diversity is what they call it. If you go with a system like this, now you've got shelves of shallow, mid, deep, trees, birds, frogs, everything in this. This is a completely naturalized area right here. I did my undergraduate and master's thesis on wetlands, and this would be a wetland system all the way up and around here, which doesn't exist today.
Okay. Maybe one last question, then I'll defer to my colleagues and maybe come back. And so I think Commissioner Benny talked about just the legalities in terms of like your license and kind of the practice in your field of your profession that you both share. How does this work? Let's just say, I heard you say you're volunteering, so you've cleared this with your legal team. So this plan or this concept, not really a plan, an idea that you guys are presenting with the current master plan that we have in place, how much does it disrupt the current plan? I heard there was a lot to reference to what was already done in the master plan. How does this work in complement? Is there a compromise in terms of what has already been determined by the parks that this works kind of hand in hand?
First question, the board meets in Minnesota the first week in May, and I'm supposed to get the comedy, I'm supposed to get my license in May. I've paid all the fees. So by May 15th, I'll be licensed in the state of Minnesota. Secondly, there's a ton of work that's been done. Bar engineering, for example, has volumes and volumes of information that we've used to develop this concept. We've looked at every nook and cranny of that. This would be an adjustment. This is alternative 6. There's been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is alternative 6. It would have to go through the permitting process. But these are some of the best experts in the world with, Tom Lehman's team, Tom Oslin's team, the rest of our team. We can combine and come up with something that is a win-win-win with more park uses than just golf. That was a big part of these original concepts that aren't even shown here.
All right. Well, thank you.
Commissioner Menz.
Thank you, President. Good morning. A couple of questions. So we disconnect the creek. Can you respond to why that's necessary again? Just to explain the science that you're thinking, why it has to be disconnected.
Well, first of all, I heard a lot of sort of maybe complaints about that, and then I heard something to the effect that Nokomis, it bypasses Nokomis. We got to keep doing that because it keeps Nokomis clean. Well, it's the same thing here. If we bypass this, we can control the water in Lake Hiawatha and make it extremely clean, so you don't have phosphorus and TSS and things going into Lake Hiawatha. It can become cleaner than it is today if we bypass it. Why is it important to bypass it? Because there's more urbanization, there's more water. We got to let it stack up so that it can flow out by gravity. And so if you don't disconnect it, it's going to backwater into the lake, it's going to backwater onto the golf course, and it's going to backwater in general, which is this solution right here. You intentionally let it backwater all the way onto the golf course, and as I said, almost create 2 Lake Hiawathas. Instead, if you channelize it, it'll leave on its own, and it won't touch the site. Except for when it gets really high, we purposely and intentionally relieve some of that water onto the lake to store it so that you don't raise the water level too much. Does that answer your question?
That does. And so I've also heard criticisms around the fact that it kind of just makes Lake Hiawatha a big dumping ground, almost like a giant holding pond. So what would your response, engineering or science-wise, be to that criticism?
I'm not sure I understand your question 100%, but so in the Barr report, what they found, this is really cool that they did this, they did an isotope analysis on the water, so they could tell where the water came from. And what they found was underneath Lake Hiawatha was Minnehaha Creek water. So Minnehaha Creek water is coming down, it goes into the lake, leaks down, and it mounds up. But the water just west of the site was fresh rainwater. So if you don't send Minnehaha Creek water through the lake anymore and you send it out, you're going to have fresh water basically coming through the subsurface and connecting with the lake. And the lake is going to be purer and fresher. And not only that, but you're going to get circulation out of it because through this red tow drain system, and anytime it rains out, you're going to be basically pulling water out and new rainwater from the groundwater is going to be coming in. So you'll be replacing it with fresh water.
Last question, then you might not know the answer to this question, but if our plan, if the current master plan that I would like to remind this body was rejected, and we're currently looking at alternative plans, which I think that is very appropriate for this board to do, especially considering the situation. And I commend President Forney for allowing this board to hear this plan and the community's concerns. For the funding, do you anticipate more private funding for this project due to the nature of the historical aspects? Or do you anticipate that this would be a primarily publicly funded project? I'm just wondering if when you're thinking about those funding sources.
Commissioner Metz, we as a team have got together and identified public agencies and funding mechanisms and sources that start with local and go to federal. But we haven't stopped there. We've begun discussion with private entities, some being, philanthropic organizations who are very concerned about the cultural heritage of Hiawatha, and I think would be willing to step up if the plan resonated with them.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay. Commissioner Benny.
Mr. Comer, what's a tow drain?
A tow drain system was something that's common in the industry to basically connect, different areas of groundwater together and convey it to a central location, which happens to be a pump station. Michael Schroeder, in the last presentation, you had mentioned that was one of the things that was considered in the past through the master plan, tow drain in the neighborhoods to keep it high and dry. And in this case, we would use the tow drain strategically right where we need it, which is on the northwest corner, which is the low-lying area, and we'd connect that to the lake so that they all have a common water surface. That's where it always has been, 810.
Okay, yeah, I think you're describing basically like a drain tile type system. I've not heard, practiced in Minnesota for 20 some years, and I've not really heard the term tow drain used here because it's not how we talk about these things. And of course, draining ground, it makes a difference when you have a frost line and things like that, how you actually deal with those things. So anyway, the other thing is the freeboard in the lake that you're talking about. What's the delta there? Is it like 1.5 feet or 2 feet that you're thinking, round numbers? If you build up the berm and you're using the lake to actually store the backwater, to store the flood water.
Just to be clear, no creek water would go into the lake until we go to 815, which is about a 10-year event.
Mm-hmm.
But when it does, if the water surface, which was 813 today, and it's been like that for the last 20 years, if we pull it back down to where it was in the 1970s, that's 810. So you have 3 feet of freeboard, 50 acres, about 150 acre feet.
So 3 feet of freeboard.
Yes.
So imagine then, I think to what Commissioner Menz sort of asked, is being used as a holding pond, the term you used. Basically, it's not really naturalistic at all. It's being used like a storage pond at Ridgedale Mall. It isn't going to have a habitat. The boundary edge is going to change all of the time. That would affect the beach and the use of it. The water bodies on the east side of the lake coming around, supposedly creating a wetland would not be a stable or natural edge to the lake at all. And also that would obstruct people accessing it. So we'd trade the access that you can't do from the backside during the summer because of the golf fencing. You'd still only get half the lake to human feet. So, and it would just be a very unpredictable and unnaturalistic edge. It wouldn't be environmentally sound at all. So,
do you mind if I respond to that real quick? So here's the level of the lake. So the level of the lake actually goes, this is from the bar report, it goes from 812, 813, 811, 814, it goes up and down, up and down, up and down. It wouldn't do that anymore if it was disconnected. If it was disconnected, it would actually be held wherever we want to hold it. We could hold it at 809.5 if we wanted to. It would never change until there was a 10-year storm event, and it would fill up for a week during a 10-year event and get pulled back down again.
President Forney, yeah. So it would change with rain events. It would change with rain. It would change with the attachments from the storm drain system. So it would change all the time. It would not be a stable, naturalistic edge. The current master plan, which is compromising, it's engaged with the public, that, you know, been deeply engaged, and is trying to develop the most naturalistic set, you know, environmental plan while maintaining actual golf. So, okay, thank you.
Commissioner Benny, can I ask you a question? Did you say something about the fence being a problem with access to the park? Did I hear that correctly?
Currently, you can only, and you can't access that side of the lake
yeah.
in the summer because of golf, because you don't want to get hit, you know, you can't do it. So you only have about 180 degrees of access half the year. So.
Well, I think one thing that I would say, I think there was something about fences earlier in the conversation as well, and is when Tom and I first started talking about the golf course, I was looking at the boundary of the park and noticed that the park boundary actually is quite large, and there's a fence around the golf course, which I just like, why is there a fence around the golf course? You have this beautiful park, which is expanded out and it kind of bulges out. Then you have a fence around the golf, which seems completely against everything you would desire for an open place. You know, so probably the first thing that we would do, you know, in terms of golf and Hiawatha Golf Course is the fence would have to go. It just would have to go. There's no reason for a fence to keep anything out, anybody out. I mean, there's ways of keeping cars off the golf course. There's ways of keeping motorcycles off the greens, but there's no need for a fence. It's meant to be inclusive, not exclusive. You know, so that's just my 2 cents about the fence.
Commissioner Schaefer. You had mentioned there was a reduction in groundwater pumping, and I may have missed it, but what would be that reduction in pumping? Was it a certain percentage number, or could you just tell me again if I missed it?
I mean, we haven't gotten to the point where there's hydrologic models or hydrogeologic models, I should say. But remember, the water surface elevation of the lake would be reduced by 3 feet, and you'd basically just be running the lake where the groundwater table was. So I think there'd be very little pumping of groundwater, except for the natural forces of fresh rainwater coming in from the west. So there could be, you know, at least a 50% reduction in my opinion, just shooting from the hip on that.
Thank you. Vice President Smith. Did you have another question? No. No, Schaefer. Thank you.
Okay. Another question. This may be for Mr. Darwin. Where are you all? I know there was work to get the golf course designated as a historical designated site. Where is that process?
We're still in that process as we speak right now. We've been talking to Mr. Charles Birnbaum about that, and the application's been submitted. So we're going down that road in that process.
Do you have a timeline on how typically the turnaround for that sort of process is? Is there an idea?
No, Mr. Osland would be better at that.
I think that's a question that we would have to pose to Mr. Birnbaum. It can vary depending on the size and the demand of the project. So,
thank you. Second question. Why now? Why 2020, some odd years later, where the gentleman who said he had brown hair prior to this process some 10,000 years ago, and here we are 10,000 years later and he has white hair. I'm being dramatic.
Sure.
Of course, the gentleman was much younger, but it's a bit dramatic to say why now, why not engage during the community engagement process, or were you?
I don't think the community heard your voice, meaning the commissioners on this board. I mean, all it took for me to get this started and get people involved was simply just to put the voice out there and say, hey, we have a problem in the minority community here in South Minneapolis. We'd like to work with the park board to resolve that problem in South Minneapolis. We could have filled this room tonight with speakers, but in the essence of time, we held that down because our information that we wanted to pass along to you is very important to us. For example, I heard compromise. We are more than willing to compromise because there's more than enough space to have more activity surrounding Lake Hiawatha. People mention that, it's not natural. Well, the lake itself has been modified, obviously, because it's no longer Rice Lake, as it was mentioned earlier. So when we talk about certain things being natural, this is a natural plan because it increased the number of wetlands. We talked about compromise. We are compromising completely by standing here and asking you for more time to come up with a master plan that will fit in everybody's pocketbook, in everybody's household, and everybody will be invited to come and enjoy this space. We mentioned people being licensed. The people that generated the park board's master plan, they weren't licensed, not here in the state of Minnesota. So when we talk about finalizing and financing, it's all in the planning stage, including your master plan, because there's a lot of work to be done if your plan gets approved. If it gets approved, you still have to come up with the funding. If it gets approved, you still have to do the hydraulical work that's necessary to make sure that your plan is complete, because everybody knows that if you flood out an area, that doesn't mean that the water is going to act like you intended it to act. Trash. I heard trash. Like all the trash is coming from the golf course. It's a known fact that the trash does not come from the golf course. The trash actually comes up toward Lake Street and flows into that area. We heard phosphorus from the golf course flowing into Lake Hiawatha. That's not true. The phosphorus that actually flows into Lake Hiawatha comes from the surrounding homes and the streets and the space. And that's the part that we would work with the city of Minneapolis. We would work with you to put together a plan that's feasible, not only feasible, but the right thing to do in the community. And that's all we're asking you to do the right thing, to not ignore the cultural value, to not ignore what that historical sites and the wetlands that we plan to increase. Our plan actually increases the level of activity, not just for golfers, but for the surrounding community. It also protects the surrounding community. And so when you really look at it with an open mind, the one thing that you cannot refuse, and that is we come to you talking about partnering, putting together private funds along with public funding so that we can save the citizens in this area money. Our plan, we're saying, will cost less than what you've proposed today in your master plan. And if you give us time to actually work on this plan, we will prove that. But keep in mind, we're here to help you solve the water problem. We're here to save the cultural value of Hiawatha. We're here to preserve the community for the youth of today so that they can come to that golf course and walk on the same course that legends have walked on. But if you flood out the designated area, that just happens to be the area that Tiger Woods did his presentation for First Tee. That just happens to be the area where, you had not just Solomon Hughes, but you had Joe Louis, Billy Eckstein, Teddy Rhodes. A lot of these names you might not recognize. But these are historical names that came to that community because in a lot of instances in Minnesota, that was the only place that they could play in 1938 and 39. It was at Hiawatha Golf Course. So all I'm saying is that when you hear the mistruths about the golf course causing the trash in Lake Hiawatha, I would suggest to you that you point out the truth and tell your constituents that the trash does not come from Hiawatha, that instead the city should have done their job and cleaned up the trash before it reached Lake Hiawatha. The phosphorus, if the city did its job, we wouldn't have a phosphorus situation. Now let's come back to here. All we're asking for is the park board to listen, to give us time. And we're talking about saving you money. We're talking about putting together the proper expertise from private resources. We are not getting paid to stand here, but we have a high level of expertise that represents thousands of dollars of man hours that have gone into this. We're talking about a level of expertise that I'm saying if you partner with us, we can resolve all the misnomers that have been going on, pertaining to, if you have a golf course here, then my kid can't walk through. I play golf in Florida. There are walking paths through all those golf courses. There's jogging passes through, the same golf courses. So in other words, golf courses don't have to be an adversarial environment for anyone. Golf courses can not only teach you about topography, the cultural aspect, how to count, because you have to count to play golf. You have to make decisions. And we're working with the youth in the community today, to teach them some of the things about playing golf and hopefully make them the type of citizens that we all would have, basically tax-paying citizens.
That's
That's what
awesome.
I'm referencing, that contribute.
Excuse me,
Sure.
Darwin, we really do
No,
need to
no,
get on to
and
our
I
meeting.
appreciate that.
No, so Commissioner, are you finished?
No, one more question. So my next question is, this 90-day window of time for consideration, is that sufficient enough to work with the experts in the park and their master plan and that team to come up with a sufficient plan?
If it's all that we can get, then that's what we will have to work with as far as those parameters.
Okay.
We don't want to be in a time constraint, but recognizing time is of essence and people want to move on from this situation. Keep in mind, I heard someone say we've been dealing with this for 8 years. That's right. But the city's been dumping water into Lake Hiawatha for more than 20 years, and they haven't done anything about it. Why are we rushing to get this done today? Because we simply want to protect an asset in the city of Minneapolis that has been there for 100 years. And if you wipe 100 years off the table, you can't go back and get it tomorrow.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's all the lights that I see. And so I hope we've gotten the information that we need to make our decisions here and everything. It's been a good hour and a half that we've had this conversation. I just need you to know that, we appreciate, all of your input, your expertise that's come forward and everything. This body needs to consider your words, which we will be doing later in the agenda that we now finally need to get onto. So thank you all. And so I will move on to reports of officers. Welcome back.
Thank you,
Superintendent
President Forney and
Bangora.
Commissioners.
And
Thank
please share with us your couple
Yep.
more.
Also from the Planning Committee, I'd like to move that the board adopt Resolution 2022-156, a resolution authorizing the plan proposed in Resolution 2021-249 related to the Hiawatha Golf Course Area Master Plan, come before the board and directing staff to organize a public hearing before the Planning Committee of the Board of Commissioners on April 20th, 2022.
Second, okay. I see some lights, or one light, excuse me. Commissioner Thompson.
Yes, I would like to propose an amendment to that. Should I read it now?
Please.
Give my rationale. Thank you. I would like to amend Resolution 2022-156 to state, given the historical impact of the Hiawatha Golf Course, and a possible Section 106 review by the Federal Historic Registry, and given the implicit directive from the prior Board of Directors in the summer of 2021 that the voice of the Browns Foundation should be considered in any master plan going forward, and given the reality that voting on our current master plan, Resolution 2021-249, does not consider these two elements, be it resolved that the Board of Commissioners organize a public hearing on 2021-249 related to the Hiawatha Golf Course Area Master Plan, and directing staff to organize a public hearing before the Planning Committee of the Board of Commissioners no earlier than the first regular meeting of the board in August of 2022 to allow consideration for a separate plan resolving these issues to be established and properly debated on its merits. Should I explain why, or
I think
let
we
it
need
go?
a second.
Oh, go ahead.
Seconded.
Okay, we hear a second. Okay. Any discussion, please? Go right ahead, please, Commissioner Thompson.
Obviously we've already had a very robust discussion. I have prepared pretty much from the moment I got on my flight out of Mount Kilimanjaro area until now to properly put my brain around how to describe why I think this is important. I'm going to scrap all that to just use some examples that I heard tonight in our discussion. I'm wondering if anyone on the dais or in the room has ever heard of the invisible knapsack. I would assume at least some people have, sometimes called the invisible backpack. It is basically the idea that white privilege exists, and most of us don't see it. And I would like to list some things that came into my mind about that idea. Access to the Community Advisory Committee. I reached out to many who were on the Hiawatha CAC, and they were appointed by park board members or city council members. So would access to the Community Advisory Committee maybe go in our invisible backpack? I think it would. Defining what compromise means. I think being the ones who get to declare that goes in the backpack. How about sitting in here comfortably while other people are outside? And we had different things going on. Is that in the backpack? I think so, yes. So the reality is we had a very robust discussion. I don't deny that 8 years is a long time, but I was an 8-year-old kid having my birthday party at Lake Hiawatha, and that was far longer ago, and it was an issue then. So I don't think that waiting a little while to see if we can't find a solution would be betterment. So that's why I proposed this, and I have so much more to say, but I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Commissioner Benny.
We've had somewhat of a discussion. I would say it hasn't been robust. We've heard a lot of discussion, but I don't think that we've had a chance to really talk about this. And I guess there's good faith in all the members of the board, and I heard some good faith today from some of the people that spoke. But I heard some things that were a problem for me, and I have to say, so far, what we had presented to us, I don't consider to be any kind of path forward. There's no viability in that. It's not even questionable whether or not that was a violation of state statute for that to actually occur. And it's a solution that's looking, it's a plan that's looking at one thing, and which is 18 holes of golf. And that was looked at for 8 years. And there are lots of people that poured a lot of time into this work. So I just, and then in this resolution, this is calling out things like Section 106. So, at this stage of any project or any plan or whatever, this kind of environmental permitting is never done in depth. It's listed, it's identified, but if we were to try to move forward with this bronze plan, and if we were really concerned about literally environmental permitting or any of the permitting, the 106 is the least of our problems. It would still be in play because we'd still be modifying the lake. So this plan does not prohibit 106 scrutiny, but we would now be facing basically trying to convince the Army Corps of Engineers, the DNR, the Watershed District that, no, we're not going to flood the downstream. What that plan is proposing is essentially to say, we're going to make it so that we don't have a flood problem here anymore, and because the water's going to go out. I think that is nearly impossible. That will be nearly impossible to permit. So I have not seen anything really worth considering. I'm compelled by the history, as all of us are. I don't think there's not one of us that isn't, but this is not viable, so.
I'm sorry, I didn't see who went first and everything, so I'm just gonna. Oh, okay. Commissioner
I
Benson.
never actually took my light off because I would love to respond to Commissioner Benny.
Okay, that's not the way we normally do things, but
Then I'm after.
yes, Commissioner Menz.
Thank you, President Forney. I really agree that we should take our time on this. Unfortunately, it's been 8 years, and I know that there's been a lot of community engagement. But what we saw tonight was also community engagement, and it showed me that we need a little bit more. And I don't think it's an either or that we're trying to decide on here. I think we got closer to a true compromise today than we have been. That this issue has been dividing us for a long time, and like I said, we voted it down, and now we're bringing it back, and that seems it's insulting to the Black community, in my opinion, from what I've heard from folks that I know. I think that we can't ignore, and I will push back that this is not only about 18 holes of golf. This is about protection of a Black asset in our community. That's what I'm hearing. And I know, and I have been to Lake Hiawatha to pick up waste. We are, and I'm going to hashtag litter league. So there's a lot of trash that's in the environment that gets to Hiawatha Lake, the Lake Hiawatha. We need to figure out how to deal with that. I think that we need more time, that we deserve, that the group that has been formed, the community that came here today to say that they want this asset protected. And it is important for us to think about this as 18 holes. Like I said, I golfed on a 9-hole golf course when I was a kid, but my Wing Park public golf course was not the historical significance that Hiawatha Golf Course is. And we cannot continue to erase Black history. We need to restore it. And this is kind of an opportunity to do that. Unfortunately, it could be at the expense of some environmental protection. And it pains me to say that it's always either or. And I think that maybe today we got a little bit closer to it being collaborative. But that only time will tell. But I think if we rush this, we're once again ignoring the cultural and historical significance of a place that Worth dredged, let's be clear, Worth dredged it, ruined it, and then it was created and something great grew out of it, and now we're trying to change it back to something that's not really going to be that again. It's not going to be the wetland that it was. That ship sailed. And we can't I don't know what I'm saying anymore, but it's tough. But I support the amendment for more time.
Okay, once again, I'm not sure where everything is, but I'm going to go to Commissioner Schaefer.
I would just like to say, first of all, I want to thank everybody that's been involved in this process to date. Lake Hiawatha CAC, neighborhood community members, Friends of Lake Hiawatha, Save Hiawatha 18, MPRB staff, former and current commissioners, especially Commissioner Muschit. Musich, because of the consultants that MPRB has been involved with. This group of people has been invested time and energy, and through this process, you have shown that you care. And this is what really gives me hope for the future of our parks. This dialogue and this kind of robust engagement really gives me hope for where our parks are headed, and actually even greater where our city is headed. I will support this amendment today because I believe that this amendment will make our board's final decision. This is not a decision yet on the merits of this plan. This is a decision to delay. I believe this will make our final decision and vote stronger and demonstrate good decision making. A good decision can be held up to the light to an alternative plan and become either a stronger plan or modified in light of that plan. So we have an opportunity to listen to the Black community, the Bronze Foundation, Cultural Landscape Foundation, and possibly the PGA. And in light of our long history of strife that we've already talked about and the cultural connection, I agree that it's the right thing to do is to give them time and to hear their vision. And additionally, in order to implement this plan, the price tag is 40 to 60 million. We need to be looking beyond our MPRB and city resources for other partners. And I think for us to be able to build legitimacy, once we get to that budgeting and financing process, we have to look at this plan. Otherwise, for us to step out to the state or whomever, other partners, and not have looked at this and what other opportunities may be presented, I think it gives us a stronger position at that point. Is offering extension and delaying the easiest, most direct path? No. But I believe it's the right path. We've waited a long time, and I think another 3 months is a good investment to bring people together and to really be confident in that final decision making. And I don't have all the, I think, Commissioner Benny, to your credit, I think you can see maybe some of the potential holes in the plan that aren't fleshed out at this point. But the rest of us don't see that and would like the staff's input in sharing that.
Commissioner Olson.
Yeah, I just have a quick question for staff, because I've heard various things that Hiawatha was the first black course in Minnesota. I've heard it's the first in Minneapolis. So was it the first in Minnesota? Was it the first in Minneapolis? Or was it allowed for black residents to play on all public Minneapolis courses all at the same time? What's the true history of Hiawatha? I'm just curious. Thanks.
I don't want to suggest that any of us are experts in this. I know we looked at some things around the Bronze Foundation and the Bronze Tournament, but I don't know that we looked to see what golf course in Minnesota was the first to admit black golfers in Minnesota. Now, I know that more recently, and related to an action that was brought forward in public hearing earlier, Secretary Ringgold might have other insights. I don't know. I'm not trying to put the spotlight on anybody, but I would suggest we may need more time to be able to provide you a fair and correct answer to that question.
I would agree.
Point of information, is that appropriate right now?
Yes, if you say point of information.
I think that's part of the issue. We don't know the history. Like that it's very hard to delve into that and say this is it.
Should be a question.
Sorry.
Yeah, and so I don't know. This is, I mean, we Commissioner Thompson brought up, the white privilege, and Commissioner Smith, Vice President Smith, sorry, brought up the fact that we live in a white supremacist society, and I mean that's absolutely true. I think we're all very conscious of that, and the meaning of this course is certainly undeniable, but I mean, I'm just having a hard time, you know, allowing, pushing for 18 holes at the expense of future generations, to maintain 18 holes when it's just. So golf, I looked up some stats on golf. It is 77% of golf players are male. The average age is 54 years old. 72% of golf players are white. Nationally, under 3% of golf players are black. To get started golfing, if you're a kid, it can range anywhere from $800 to $3,000. Yearly costs can range anywhere from $500 to $2,000. I mean, depending how much you play. And it's just, I mean, with 9 holes, we will still be able to have youth programs. We will still be able to do all of our amazingly affordable and inclusive programming for youth of color, for youth throughout the city to get to know the sport. And then they can go and they can play at our other courses like Worth, and they can make history, new history, which is something that we were discussing the renaming of the chalet. While it may or may not have been the first golf course, it certainly to allow black residents to play, it certainly wasn't the last. And I think if we try to contort ourselves too much to stick to, our, vision of the past and how we need to continue to be, what that comes at is an expense of the opportunity cost of a natural environment, which, yeah, it's not going to be the same, but we are continuing to pay a cost of having an a man-made artificial area that is incredibly detrimental. I'm sorry, all golf, no matter how you do it, is incredibly detrimental to our environment. And it is an ongoing cost that we are paying by maintaining that. And we are mortgaging the future of our future generations so that folks can have 9 extra holes to play on. And it's just, and so I just really think that if you don't think that the master plan is good enough on this amendment, I really think that we should vote this amendment down. We should go to April 20th. We should have our discussion on the master plan. And if you don't like it, we can vote it down there, and then we can give opportunity to another plan. But it's just the time of the 8-year plan has come, and it's our duty now as a board to make that decision. I don't think that we need to have some other plan that is potentially greener. Maybe this will be the perfect. Maybe this will be the perfect one. Let's make the hard decision now.
We need to move on. Okay, I believe Nope, she's going for the second time. You have not spoken yet, so, yeah, Vice President Smith.
All right. Well, listen, y'all know it all. Y'all feel some type of way about white supremacy. We all do, right? And yes, I said that. So thank you, Commissioner Olson. Indeed, that's just where we are. It's one thing to acknowledge it. It's another thing to live it and not escape it. I don't have the privilege of unpacking my Blackness. And that is what we're talking about. That's what you heard. What we heard from the Browns Foundation today was that they did not feel connected to the process. The community didn't hear the call for engagement. So that was clear. And that made me pause to rethink about what is happening. If they felt disconnected from the actual process and did not feel included as a community, we're talking about a Black community in Minneapolis, in St. Paul, and wherever else folks come from to golf at Hiawatha. There was a lack of engagement, whether it was unintentional or intentional, for those folks to be engaged at such a historic space. Whether it was the first or the second, it doesn't matter. It was a space. And we're talking about a park system that was very much segregated, where Black folks still could not engage and go inside of buildings. Yes, you could access certain features, but you still were excluded. Now, most of us were not alive, but your parents were, your grandparents were. And so, as a byproduct, at least we can do is here. I'm not trying to create more work for anyone, but 8 years, 400 years, 100 years, we're not even talking about that. We're talking about 1938. So, time, we have time. We're not choosing between. It's not an either or, it's both and we owe it to the public and to the community, all communities, not one exclusively. I am not a golfer. I do top golf. I do mini golf with my sons who enjoy every sport there is. And so do other children. All sports are expensive if you have no money. We are talking about poor people that want to access. We're talking about people who have the means that want to continue to access. We're talking about people that broke barriers together. And so at least we can do is consider and listen and entertain the possibility that something would work better or different with what we've already have proposed. And that is fair. I know it's a lot. It's 8 years. I have an 8-year-old son who will be turning 9 in about 12 days. I understand the veracity of time. I also understand the importance of the issue and the fact that we do not have the privilege of making the wrong choice and to be on the right side of history for the sake of humanity. That is it. Thank you.
Awesome. I believe Commissioner Musich, you have not had the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, President Forney. I'll keep my comments brief. I'm very thankful for everyone that came out tonight to talk to us and share their thoughts on just everything that's happening right now around this issue. As one of the two commissioners that's been here for the entirety of the discussion around this space, I can tell you that in large part, the reason that the major use of land in this location for recreational purposes will be for golf is because of the feedback that we received from golfers of all colors and creeds. We heard from them very clearly that this place is important and special and has played a huge role in their community. It's why we don't have a plan before us that has no golf here, even though there was a strong push for us to not have golf here at all. Because commissioners heard very clearly that golf needed to be part of the future. It's why we passed a resolution saying that staff should examine 18 holes of golf, but at a minimum to deliver 9 here so that you could play a game of golf. Albeit it would be 9 holes, but for many of us that don't have the patience for 18, that's how we play the sport. I do not believe a delay will get us to a place where we make a different decision about what the future of this place is. It's not getting drier. The elevation that they keep referencing, 810, that's not an elevation the lake has been at for decades. It will likely never get there again unless we are in an extreme drought for many years. It's going to get wetter and wetter here. It is happening already. This year alone, we are several inches above the typical rainfall for this time of year. As the ground becomes more and more saturated, we are more likely to see floods. This is our future. It's changing, and we are trying to adapt. That is what this plan is asking us to do. It's trying to adapt to the coming changes that are only going to be more extreme than we're currently experiencing. The plan notes that the alternate plan that we heard tonight noted that it would protect the golf course from flooding. Well, the golf course is a floodplain. To protect it is removing it from that floodplain. The Army Corps of Engineers would never allow us to do that. It's what they've told, it's what we've been told over and over and over again when asking, what can we do? Can't we just raise the golf course out of where it's wet? We can't do that because you take away the floodplain. And the floodplain is essential for protecting what's downstream of this space. We talked about cutting the creek off from the lake. The lake exists because it's an oxbow in the creek. To take the creek away from it is depriving it from one of its main sources of water. To not allow stormwater from the surrounding area via the stormwater drains to come into this space is depriving the lake of that water. To claim that somehow this is a more responsible or environmentally sound solution is baffling to me, because I do not see how that argument works. And I'm probably the most knowledgeable person on this issue up here, just through the hundreds of hours of testimony from the public and conversations with engineering firms and the Department of Natural Resources and every expert that's come to the table. We've come to a place where we have a hard decision to make that changes the historic use, to try to adapt this space so that it can continue to be golf in the future, rather than a space that floods and stays flooded and destroys that space. So it has to be restored. I'm unable to support the amendment.
So I'd like to have an opportunity to speak as well. First of all, I have to thank everyone who's in this room for giving such latitude to this group to present. I feel it was incredibly generous, and I cannot thank you all. I had to say it was selfish, and I don't know, how to put words around it and everything, but I was looking for a nugget. That's the only way I can describe it and everything. And I did not hear the nugget. What Commissioner Musich is saying, we've gone through this for a long time. The two of us, I think, have tried so hard to search for solutions. She knows as well as I do that, I did support, 18 holes. I, say that, hey, if you can have a golf course in the Netherlands, hey, we can do it here. But I've been proven over and over again that's not the case. And I was looking for something there between comments that Commissioner Abeni has shared, comments that the Bronze Group and everything like that. I don't feel it's a viable solution. I was really hoping, I really was. I'm so grateful that staff put in the procedures, the route we always need to go, where we need to, do the community engagement. We need to demonstrate, what are the benefits of the plan, get the regulatory approvals, regional park alignment, all the things that are listed here, okay? I didn't hear this being addressed. And what was I was trying to, pull from them how they are basing the fact that it's going to be substantially cheaper. They gave to me one solution, which is what Cobb's Creek. Cobb's Creek cost $64 million. So, I don't hear a reduction there. So, I asked about community engagement. My understanding is that there was criticism about the community engagement at Cobb's Creek. So, I didn't hear the there's that I really wanted to hear. And so it's hard for me to say, but I don't see a reasoning for delay. See now, I think it's Commissioner Abeni is next. No, excuse me, Commissioner Thompson, I apologize.
Thank you, President Forney. I'm glad I finally made the list. I'm joking. So several things that I heard actually support the reason to pause for a second. First of all, Commissioner Olson said, let's just vote on it if you don't want to do, our prior board already did that. So implicit in the directive is that we find something different. Commissioner Benny talked about the license and this specific plan, and those are all valid, but the reason again for delay is let's figure that out. President Forney talked about community engagement. Yes, that's again the delay. The reality is I respect very deeply the work that Commissioner Musich has done and President Forney deeply, deeply There are 7 of us who are new to this, and we have different paths to be sitting on this dais. And our voices were asked to be here by our community in different ways, and we then have I specifically feel deeply that I have a mandate to bring those voices up, because right before the last election is when this all got voted down, everything changed hands, here we are. I have said to anybody who will listen, if it comes down to 9 holes, I get that. And I totally respect the idea that Commissioner Musich and President Forney have already been down this path, but I have not. And I like to turn over the stones for myself. And I know that there are voices in my community, you heard a few of them tonight. It is hard when you feel cut off at the knees on repeat, and then it's like, you're gonna cut us off. I mean, again, I'll ask, has people heard of the idea of being triggered? Our behavior is like very triggering to the community I represent. And I've heard a lot of that. And it makes it hard to think that we are gonna pass this off as though it's just supposed to be like business as usual, when honestly, I have stacks of things, and half of it I forgot at home, of research of realizing at the very beginning, at the jump, we were supposed to do 18 holes. There was never a consideration for 0, even though people wanted it, or at least from what I've read and tried my best to unpack. What I personally am asking for is more time so that the community can be heard. Yes, that's all I'll say. It's important. This is important. This is the defining thing of our board. I'll say it right now. This issue will be the defining thing of the 9 of us. 100%, full stop, 2 months out of the gate. It will be the biggest thing in 4 years. So let's get it right. Honestly, let's get it right. That's it. Thank you, President Forney.
Commissioner Menz?
Thank you, President Forney. I would agree that this is a very defining moment, and we need to make that decision clearly, and I think that a little bit more time will help us make an effective decision and make sure that all the voices are heard in a valued way. And we did vote this down. We are bringing it back. And I don't want to devalue any of the staff work on this plan. I think that the plan is well done. It crosses all the T's and dots all the I's, and it brings in all the things. So, you know, Mr. Peterson and Mr. Schroeder and everybody who worked on this plan, the Hiawatha Golf Course plan is a very good plan for a defined compromise, but honestly it's a white defined compromise. So how do we figure out what is the new compromise? Because we voted down a plan, we have another option, which a lot of us probably don't like. So what's the new compromise? I feel like we need some time to shake that out, and maybe that can happen in the next 3 months. Maybe not, but if we make the decision now, I agree with Commissioner Thompson that we are making a bad decision to do it so quickly for this board.
Commissioner Benny?
Okay, so, I mean, I do think a lot is being, when you have these conversations and it gets intense, I love the passion. I do. But you kind of forget in the moment that we actually don't have any kind of we're not considering anything that's viable right now. And we're also, there's a very, very good possibility that the engineer that led that discussion is not going to be licensed in Minnesota by the deadline, believe me. And so, and there are probably thousands of Minnesota registered engineers that could be engaged to do this work that understand where we are. So I would say that, again, I bring up good faith. This extension is from your hearts. I see it. There's good faith there. But I have a feeling that we're going to get close to that deadline and we're still going to be looking at about the same thing. And it's not going to be any more viable or well thought through. And especially if that part of the discussion is being led by someone that has zero experience of dealing with our permitting and our environmental milieu here in Minnesota, which is heinous and difficult. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing is, this may be a defining moment, and I think there are a lot of people that bring a different type of passion that are saying, oh my gosh, we've been, asking for this nonstop and working on this in good faith. And I can't remember who it was, a speaker, it might have been Mr. Dean, who said something like, the DNR doesn't have the power to close the golf course. And that's true, the DNR doesn't. You know who does? We do. So there's a thing called RGU, Responsible Governmental Unit. We have a responsibility to steward these lands in a way that is managing them for the environmental causes and detrimental impacts that they might be producing. We have a responsibility to the environment, to the water, to the land in that location. So, I would just ask my fellow commissioners to consider the fact that we're not going to ever see anything more viable or possible, and I have a very strong feeling we're going to get a request for an extension when the time comes. So I can't vote. I actually cannot, I don't think even legally, a vote for this extension, and this resolution.
Commissioner Schaefer?
I just want to point out that the ecological side of this plan is very important to all the commissioners that are sitting up here. We saw that on our last planning committee, where all 5 of us voted unanimously to bring the Lake Hiawatha plan forward. We want the trash out of the lake and the situation dealt with by February, the deadline that we have with the Pollution Control Agency or whatever. And maybe that has to be on a separate track than this whole plan. Maybe that has to be pulled out and pushed forward. But I think that this decision to wait will build continuity on the board. It will strengthen our decision-making process, like I mentioned earlier, that we are generous with one another in allowing not just the community, but board members to come along, to allow voices to be heard that maybe feel like they haven't been heard. These are really important, big picture, 4 years, we're in this as a team issues. And for me, as a commissioner, the divisiveness that I saw on the last board, I want to bring us together. I want to bring our city together, right? And I'm not a scientist. I don't know. But I believe the end goal is more important. That piece of really allowing time and allowing space to see, hey, we might be able to save the taxpayers tons of money. If we find a plan that really promotes the ecological side of this and retains the 18 holes and brings in the PGA money or whatever money might be willing to invest, this could be our story. And I just don't want to let that go until we know for sure, because we could have regret, and I don't want to have regret at the beginning of my 4 years.
I apologize, Commissioner Thompson, but, okay, yeah, we're only 2 rounds here and everything. So on that, all those in favor of the motion, the amendment, the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Hey.
So I'm not sure if I heard things right, but
Sounded like 4 to 4.
4 to 4.
I think it was a 4 to 4, so the motion fails. So on to the main motion. Commissioner Music.
Thank you, President Forney. Assistant Superintendent Schroeder, would you be able to let us know whether or not you're able to respond to the questions about feasibility of the proposal that we were presented this evening by April 20th?
Tonight was the first time any of us has seen it. We had some maybe inklings of what might be presented, but certainly it would require us to be able to direct a significant amount of attention to this by the 20th, and probably get some insights from our consulting team. They are staged and ready to do this. They were ready to do it on the earlier plan, the one that they had their public meeting, or that the Browns Foundation had their public meeting around. So we're staged and ready to do that. We may not be able to have anything submitted to the board in an action, because those actions are due like Friday. But we would probably have an ability to present some kind of an evaluation to the board on the 20th.
Okay, so my primary concern is feasibility of the major components. And as long as you're able to speak to those by the 20th, I'm comfortable with us moving forward to the vote on this evening. Thank you.
Any other discussion? I too think this is a really critical time. I wanted to make sure that this was the Bronze Foundation's time. You know, to ask, you know, staff or any regulatory body or anything to be here to react on the spot, I think was not prudent, and therefore, you know, that's why I asked for it not to be done. So that is the objective of the hearing. This is not, you know, accept the plan, the master plan as it is or not. That's what the hearing is going to be about. And in the hearing, who knows, we may decide, hey, we would like to still, you know, have the Bronze involved if it seems to be viable. But I'm not hearing, excuse me, that's what I was looking for. That was the nugget that I was looking for. So I hope that people will vote in favor of this, having the hearing and be able to make sure that, you know, we get our questions answered about all of it. So I'm seeing lights popping on all over the place and everything. Commissioner Thompson.
Just to be clear, now we're talking about the resolution for the hearing, correct?
Correct.
Okay. I would just like to state that I think it's wrong-headed to go backwards. I think that this master plan has been seen to be wanting in 2 different times. We were not on this board, but it feels like it's acting in bad faith to bring it up the way that it is. The only response prior that I wanted to say to Commissioner Benny is that if we divorce ourselves from the Bronze Foundation as was shown to us tonight, I still think that we should discuss with our own planning and go back through our own records and find something different. Going backward just because there are new members here feels really wrong, and I just echo and repeat all the things I said before about the amendment. Thank you.
I believe Commissioner Thompson, and I'll see how it goes down here. Thank you. Oh, excuse
Olson,
me,
okay.
Commissioner Olson.
Yeah, so I think
Those sons.
you kind of touched on it, but I just wanted to make clear on some technicals. So we'll have a bit of a presentation from staff on, you know, getting further ideas on the Bronze plan during this meeting, if we request, which I think we do. So if at that point, if we hear things and we're kind of feeling that, you know what, actually, and after the public hearing on the plan, if we feel that we do actually want the time, can we technically push it out 3 months like we wanted at that next meeting? We can. I just am wondering, perhaps Councilor Rice, would you know, or someone else, staff, is that possible? That So
Yes, please,
there's, okay,
Counselor Rice.
The board can do whatever it wants.
okay. All right, well, okay, good. Well, so I think then, I think,
Within the rules of the board. If you care to have a hearing and want more time, you can.
okay, and, all right. Okay, well, that's good. That makes me feel better then about, I definitely think absolutely we should have this, and at that time, I think if we change our minds and we want more time, I think we can do that. So let's vote for this, and we can have those robust discussions we need. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Like I say, I'm not sure who's first, but Commissioner Menz.
Yeah, I had a little bit of a question on that too. So if we vote and we don't approve this resolution, does that mean that the plan just doesn't move forward?
I would say yes, that's the case.
And then can we also, I'm wondering if, and staff, I don't want to give you too much work, but like we're thinking about the Bronze Foundation plan and looking at that one, but also, a lot's changed in the construction industry and in inflation and in the pricing of our own plan. And I'm wondering if we might have a new cost estimate for what the Hiawatha Golf Course plan would cost moving forward. I don't know how much work that would be.
I want to make sure that I answer the what I was hearing in the questions, and I think one of them was, can we provide an updated master plan? Typically, I'm sorry, an updated cost estimate for the master plan, and we could. We typically couch those plans in a year of construction, and as we move forward, we would be escalating it by years, and we do that with all of our master plans. We have year of implementation, and we would escalate the dollars to that particular time. So at the time you're approving it, we give you a dollar amount. What we can never tell is when we would actually be in the position to have funding and plans approved to be able to implement. So at the time that we move forward, we'd be providing you with an updated cost estimate. If you wanted us to do a projection of what it would cost, say, using the master plan amount, which was calculated in 2019, and project that through to today, and then through the period of engineering, permitting, securing of dollars, we could do that. It's a projection, and it's based on a whole lot of factors that are wholly outside of our control, like inflation, the construction industry, but we have done that, and we could give you an idea. If that's answering your question.
It is. Would it take an unrealistic amount of staff time? I mean, you only have a limited amount of time to do this in the time frame that we have. Since
President Forney and Commissioner Menz, the core of it is the number that's already in there. The escalation is actually quite simple to do. We would take it and multiply it by a certain amount per year. But I do want to make certain I'm understanding something that I was beginning to hear, if I may ask a question for President Forney. Are we being if this resolution passes, we were under the presumption that we would be presenting the draft master plan, the one that was turned down before, as commissioners have noted. But I'm getting the sense that there would be a direct comparison between two plans expected on the 19th, and that's not what this resolution is asking. I'm sorry, on the 20th, and that's not what this resolution is asking for. I just want to make clear.
You are correct.
Thank
and
you.
that I don't know if we need to define that in a resolution or what, but I think in order to respond properly to the now present Hiawatha master plan and everything, the commissioners are going to want to know what is the viability of what was presented to us tonight. Anyway, so I don't know if I answered that question or not, but anyway, Commissioner Schaefer.
I have one more question. One more question around the funding, and I'm not sure who that goes to. Is there a chance that, I know that we had talked about this with the Bede-Makaska, that Billy, it's 23% or 20%, roughly 20 to 23% over last year, the increase that we're seeing on Bede-Makaska. But on this question, is there a chance that this project could move forward sooner and save staff time if others are rallying the troops and supporting with grant writing.
President Forney, Commissioner Schaefer. So let me characterize it in kind of 3 different steps. We have if the master plan is approved, we have a significant amount of engineering work to do. Engineering, not just feasibility, but actual engineering work that advances it towards a constructible set of drawings. There's probably a 1.5 to 2 years worth of work in there. Overlaid on top of that, and maybe even extending beyond that, is the permitting process we have to go through, which I would imagine this to be similar to what we're doing with Halls Island, which was a year of really intense permitting with a number of agencies. So those 2 activities, in the most compact fashion I could imagine, would take 3 years. The assembly of dollars to make this happen, I'm at a loss for. I don't know how we would do that, but I can't imagine it happening in less than even 2 or 3 years. So when we look at the horizon for this project and what we have told people from the beginning, as we moved into this master plan, that there wouldn't be a change to the golf course at the time we were starting the master plan for at least 5 years and probably longer. And I think we would hold consistent with that we just cannot move through this process quickly, fairly, and with all of this, as with all of our capital projects, we still do community engagement overlaid over the top of that. So we still have a significant amount of kind of engagement work to be doing.
Yeah, I agree. A shift would be a big commitment. I have one question for Council Rice. Do you think, from your legislative experience and trying to get bonding projects for the park board, et cetera, do you see a benefit from engaging this alternative perspective in the greater political realm of funding? Whether we go A or B, door A or B, is there a financial benefit in the long run for the park board at the legislative level in getting bonding funds, or because we're looking at significant outside funds to support this? And I want to make sure that what we do today does not harm or taint that process.
Oh, please, Council Rice.
Madam President, Commissioner Schaefer, I'm putting my hat on as lobbyist Rice, not Council Rice. A year ago at the legislative breakfast, or maybe it was 2 years ago, this matter was very controversial with some members of the delegation about the project. Then Representative Wagenius spoke up about it. So did Senator Torres Ray, Senator Champion. Senator Hayden might have been at the breakfast. Now, several of those legislators are now gone from the delegation, and obviously you're asking me to project forward several years, so who the legislators are at the time could be a factor. This is a big decision. It's going to involve, if it's $40 million or $34 million in 1919, you can do the math or make an estimate. It would be a big project. It could come from a number of sources. I mean, the city of Minneapolis, that wouldn't involve the legislature. The watershed district wouldn't involve the legislature. The federal government wouldn't necessarily, but this legislature has been a significant partner to the park board over the years. It's a big undertaking, you know, it'll be a big ask, and it probably depends on how future legislators would look at it and how solid the project is and the support for it. So I don't know if that helps at all. It's a complex equation to determine whether or not there's the political support for it. It always also depends on other priorities. We're going through a legislative session now where we have a number of competing priorities, including a hearing tomorrow on green infrastructure in front of Representative Lee's committee. So it just depends. I think the board's always been in its strongest position when it's a very clear position of the board to support a project. And that's depending on what you folks do.
Thank you. That was kind of a little bit of an unfair question, thinking of the long term. And can I ask one more question? I don't mean to put Superintendent Bangora on the spot, and I know that there is a chain of command established by this organization, but I value your input as a leader of our organization and being put in a spot that may be kind of difficult. And I would like to hear your input or advice maybe you have in your role.
Commissioner, and my apology, I stepped away from it when I sat down when I came here, so can you frame around the question for me?
Sure. I'm curious, in this decision to move forward and not look at the plan any further or get any more detail on the plan, and this idea of trying to build bridges both within the board and with the community, do you see a benefit to, I mean, what's your perspective? I know you have to be careful, but I value your wisdom, and you've been with this at least a few more years than some of us, or maybe not all of us.
Well, it's a good question, Commissioner Schaefer, and I appreciate that. I value, for me, I'm a person that I've always been engaged community. I'm very much connected to, and all the work that I've done over the years has always been hearing the voices of the community and the work that I've done in my career. I have moved further in many projects and many things that I have done by simply listening and taking the time and working through very difficult and challenging conversations. We're sitting in rooms where there's really difficult and opposing opinions. But what I've always found very beneficial for me is truly really engaging community and listening to people and listening to what they have to say. There is a tremendous amount of, there's things that are, when we hear about trauma and triggers and things that really affect people, is to understand what that means. I think we've heard very clearly here today, and we've seen in these discussions, the deep passion and understanding of people that don't feel like their voices have been heard. For people that have spent many, many years working through things, the reality is that it's a tough decision. It's a tough thing to make a decision around that, but I think that I think it's important that all voices are heard. I think it's important that perspectives are listened to and debated and discussed, and so I know I'm being very careful again about certain things because again the board makes the decisions. The board will make decisions, but I do find value in my own personal way that I've always conducted myself is hearing all aspects and all concerns and all viewpoints to make a really informed decision. My job to this board obviously is to make sure that I bring everything that I know and what I can share with you in our conversations. But it's very important to hear all aspects, and it's important to spend that time.
Yep.
I don't know if that's. I hope that it is. We are public servants. I'm a public servant. I answer to this board. The board answers to the constituents and the people that they serve.
Yep.
And so for me, it's about the people we serve. It's about this entire community, and it's incredibly complex. But we have to listen, and we have to hear it, and we have to take the time. Debatable whether or not it's 8 years or whether it's 3 months, right?
Yep.
But the important piece is that we listen and we hear.
Yep.
And make the most informed decision we can.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Commissioner Thompson?
Thank you, President Forney. I almost forgot my light was still on. I was going to ask Council Rice if, just hypothetically, and again from your expertise, if we were to get mired, let's say I'm going to throw out a hypothetical. Let's say we were to pass this and start going forward, and then we get locked into a Section 106 historical review and all these things. How would that impact any movement going forward? Timeline, feasibility, cost. I'm asking you to call balls and strikes in a hypothetical baseball game.
Madam President.
Yes, Council Rice, and if you don't feel like you want to respond, we also have Assistant Superintendent Schroeder, please.
No, Madam Chair, I think on this one I'll put the legal counsel hat on because you've asked a question about Section 106, and certainly Mr. Schroeder could respond as well. The board has in the past had to deal with these reviews. It appears that with Mr. Birnbaum's, I did review one of the Zoom things that he appeared in. I wasn't on the thing, but reviewed it later. He's talked about invoking Section 106. The board has focused on those in the past. I think Mr. Schroeder is correct in the plan. At some point, this plan would be submitted to a 106, Section 106, at least it would be scoped out by a consultant.
Mm-hmm.
If there was a historic designation of the land and it was clear that 106 was involved, we would have to deal with that. The board would have to deal with that as part of any construction or alteration of the landscape. Those can be very challenging, expensive times. It's hypothetically possible. I heard in the Bronze thing that they would bring, although he wasn't here tonight, Mr. Birnbaum would try to address those issues on the front end of the plan.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't mean someone would be precluded from raising the issue later. But I do believe from looking at this issue that that's a very realistic possibility in this matter. As soon as Mr. Birnbaum came in the paper, I got a call from Chuck Lutz from the city who was involved in the Section 106 review of PV Plaza, and he said it was very time-consuming process and it fundamentally altered what plans the city had originally proposed for that project. So it's another unknown in this master plan. The staff has considered those in the past, and again, it's looking forward to the future about what it could have. I would say that given the early indications from a national organization that has had a intervention on 106, it's as significant a potential issue that I think the boards should consider, and that it's possible to face. People make all kinds of either raise flags a lot of times. I think this is a fairly serious flag that was raised on this project. Otherwise, I don't think I would have gotten a call from another city person who's dealt with this. I wouldn't dismiss it. I think it is a factor to be considered.
Thank you. And then I had more of a procedural question. I think we heard the vote of my amendment, but I'm wondering if I'm allowed to call a roll call vote just to be crystal clear. Or am I not allowed to do that? That time's passed. Okay.
In order to call a roll call, it has to be done before the vote.
Right. Got it. Got it. Thank you.
Commissioner Menz?
So if we're going to vote on this to see if we're going to have a public hearing on the 20th about bringing the Hiawatha Golf Master Plan back to the Planning Committee. Am I correct on that?
Right.
If this resolution does not pass, or if it does pass, we have the hearing, and similar to what Graco Park was today. What is the process from there if there's amendments to be needed? I guess I'm needing a little procedural help here too. What happens then? That's at the Planning Committee. That happens within the Planning Committee, the first thing. But
Borney and Commissioner Menz, I think that's a really good question. We have been operating on this project under the direction of the board, which told us we should be seeking a solution that reduces pumping and creates at least 9 holes of traditional golf that's flood resilient and ecologically driven. That resolution has never been redirected to us. If this resolution doesn't pass, staff's obligation is still to pursue that resolution. We haven't been directed otherwise. And actually, we would be looking for direction if this doesn't pass from this board about what we should be doing.
Thank you for that clarity. So if this board is so inclined to vote for this resolution today and it does not pass, then we can bring it back in a new form, but it starts the whole process over. So the advantage of moving forward is that we continue with the public engagement that's happened. It's not a reset button. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay. All right. Thank you.
No.
Well, and we can continue to, like you said, make amendments. We can decide to push it out if we hear new stuff. I mean, so this isn't a set in stone thing. It's very much still fluid. So yeah.
Thank you. Not seeing any more lights.
One more question.
Oh.
One more, okay.
Sorry, President Forney, and maybe I'll need Michael Schroeder for this, but I believe what you will see on the agenda on April 20th is a public hearing and a resolution to approve the master plan. So just so you know that would be on the agenda as well. Am I correct on that at this point, so that you're not confused? So you could offer amendments to that resolution, but that would be on the agenda.
President Forney, Secretary Ringel is correct. We're bringing forward a master plan that has no amendments to it, so you would be voting directly on that. The board is welcome to introduce amendments. We won't have any direct comments from a public engagement period as we would normally have, because we have changed nothing from the first time this went through the process of review and holding a public hearing and the public comment period. So all of that information stands. We can provide all that information to you to help you as you move through that process, and it's probably valuable for you to have it. But staff will not be introducing any amendments to the plan.
People clear that we're voting on a resolution now to have the hearing on the 20th of April. So I'm not sure how many times you've gone. Is it 2 or is it 3 times now?
Probably 2.
Sorry, but yeah. And unfortunately, we got a whole huge agenda still getting. Anyway, so on then the motion, resolution 2022-156 and everything, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Abstentions? Okay, I think I heard it. I heard.
Can I have
Call roll call.
Okay, we'll have take. Sorry.
I don't know if I did that right.
Commissioner Abene? Aye. Commissioner Musich?
Aye.
Commissioner Schaefer?
Nay.
Commissioner Alper is absent. Commissioner Thompson?
Nay.
Commissioner Mentz?
Nay.
Commissioner Olson?
Aye.
Vice President Smith?
Nay.
You have 4 ayes, 4 nays, 1 absent.
I'll also say yay.
Oh, pardon me. My pardon. Sorry. President Forney?
Okay.
You were an aye or a nay?
I'm an aye.
Thank you. You still have 4 ayes, 4 nays, and 1 absent.
Okay, the action does not, or that motion does not carry, so we're back to square one. All right. All right. So, co-chair Abene.
Thank you. We have one more resolution from the